have some catching up to do. Let's get to it. Hey everyone, it's Taylor Kitchen and welcome back to Above the Yellow Line on the ATYL Media channel. I hope you all are having a happy new year. It's been a while since we've chatted, and because of that, there's been a lot of NASCAR news that's dropped that either I'm not caught up on, maybe you aren't caught up on, so I figured we'd all collectively talk here and get caught up on all the NASCAR news together. So without further ado, let's dive into some 2026 rule changes. Some of these controversial, some of these make absolute sense. So let's start off by talking about the DVP clock. If a car goes under the DVP clock, they can no longer qualify for that fastest lap point. Last year we saw cars, drivers, teams going to the garage and then somehow miraculously finding a crap ton of speed, getting the fastest lap, getting a point, and just overall making the most out of an otherwise crappy day, whether it was the car was caught up in a wreck, a failure of some sort. This year, that's not gonna fly. So if you go to the garage area on the DVP clock, again, you cannot get that fastest lap point. I think that's pretty fair. Another rule I think is pretty fair is that a Cup Series driver cannot compete in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series or the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series races once they hit the chase, which again, I think is pretty fair. Let those drivers focus on winning those races, collecting all the points they can in the chase, because yes, we do have a new points format. We're going back to the chase. I've been screaming this from the rooftop for the past few years that I feel a chase type of format, revisiting that, is a great in-between of the fans who still want the playoff system and the fans who wanted that 36 race points battle. I think this was a great place that NASCAR landed on, and they are safeguarding some rules to make sure that this new point system is safeguarded as best as possible. So again, the NASCAR Cup Series drivers cannot compete in trucks or O'Reilly series. That's going to be so weird to say going forward once the chase starts. Speaking of the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, there is a new rule regarding age restrictions on the series and its competitors. Now at tracks that are 1.25 miles or less, the driver only has to be 17 years old, not 18 years old like previously in the rulebook, but only 17 years old to compete on those tracks that are 1.25 miles or less. The positives here is that younger drivers are able to kind of jump ahead in the second Premier League of stock car racing, getting more exposure for their partners, getting to compete at a higher level at a younger age. The negative of that is you have younger drivers competing at a higher level against drivers that are trying to compete for a championship here, and it could create some chaos depending on the decorum of some of these drivers, their skill set, etc. The other negative, too, that Dale Jr. pointed out on social media, commenting on a post by a media member, is that this is going to hurt local short tracks. These younger drivers are not going to want to put their money towards supporting these short tracks. They're going to want to put their money towards supporting a ride in a larger series with much larger exposure. And to that I say, yeah, that is a little bit of an issue. As somebody who's worked behind the scenes helping drivers in truck in O'Reilly, I think I keep saying Xfinity, I mean O'Reilly here. As somebody who's worked in the marketing side of the sport, helping these drivers with one-off starts in those series, a lot of times you're saying, worst case scenario, we go truck series racing, but how do I go O'Reilly racing? Because that's where there's more viewership. I think the broadcast as well has more exposure opportunities for these drivers. It's a higher level, it's better competition. So these drivers are constantly looking to say, how can I get into O'Reilly racing? And now that you lower the age limit, you're going to raise the number of drivers who want to so badly compete in this series on these tracks. So I think it's going to kind of create not a scarcity issue, but an issue to where there's so many drivers wanting to funnel their opportunities into there, which isn't a bad thing. Also, definitely not bad for their partners, but I can see why it would hinder a driver's thought of wanting to utilize that money to go racing at a local short track when you could potentially elevate your career by going to the O'Reilly series for a one-off start. So very interesting rule change there. Curious your thoughts, but let's move on. I want to make sure I read this one very carefully because there was a change regarding the waiver rule. We remember last year, the year prior, there's been some changes to the NASCAR waiver. If somebody is suspended, if somebody is out due to injury, how points are changed, how your seeding in the playoffs are. Well, we no longer have the playoffs, we have the chase. So, if a waiver is granted for reasons other than a NASCAR-initiated and/or approved absence, the driver will begin with Championship Event 27 with 2,000 points. NASCAR's waiver determination, including any reseeding decision, is final and non-appealable. For example, a NASCAR-initiated absence could include a one-race suspension. Previously, a driver would start the postseason with 2,000 points. With the change in format and elimination rounds no longer a part of the format, a suspended driver would no longer drop to 2,000. Those drivers would simply be reseeded to wherever they finished in the regular season. This was not the case prior to with the playoff format that we had, so something to keep in mind there as well. If there is something like an injury or some sort, the points will not be reset for those drivers going into the chase. So those are some overarching rule changes. I'm sure there's going to be a few more that are going to come out before we get to the Clash, which is, oh my gosh, like next weekend? Is that right? This is crazy. But I will keep you up to date right here on Above the Line, also at abovetheline.com. Speaking of the abovetheline.com website, I had to show you all my new NASCAR.shop stand. This is the perfect way to display my diecast as well as my cards, because I tend to struggle to find a way to display my cards. I don't want to put them in a binder. Like, I want them to be out to see. So this was the perfect display option. Myself, Matt from Benzik Designs, as well as Dan from NASCAR.shop, we all kind of got together and tried to figure out the best way to display them all, and also come up with a unique way to display your matching cars and cards together. And we have this incredible, lovely stand from NASCAR.shop. So make sure to go to abovetheline.com to check this out, get your stands today, and also be on the lookout for custom nameplates. That's right, nameplates of your favorite drivers will be available to swap out and customize with your NASCAR.shop stands. So be on the lookout, again, abovetheline.com. Back to some news. We know Rajah Caruth is going to be competing in the number 88 for Junior Motorsports next year in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series for 23 of the 33 races. But then the question is, who's going to fill out the rest of that schedule? Well, now we know it's going to be the Hendrick Motorsports Cup Series guys filling out the rest of that 10 race schedule that had yet to be completed until today. So here's who's going to be competing in what race. We have Alex Bowman, who will be competing in only 2 races, the Spring Darlington and the Spring Nashville race. Chase Elliott will also only be competing in 2 races in the summer. We have him slated for the Chicagoland race and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway race as well. William Byron and Kyle Larson will be doing 3 races apiece. For William Byron, it'll be the Spring Phoenix race, Spring Kansas, and the Summer Pocono race. For Kyle Larson, he's going to be returning to the Junior Motorsports cars in the Spring Vegas race, Spring Bristol, and Spring Texas. We know how good he is at Bristol. Would not be surprised if he swept that weekend. Had to make sure I was getting those dates right as well, so apologies for me looking at my screen. But yeah, I'm a really big fan of the Cup Series drivers racing in the lower series. I have no issue with it. I had an issue with it if they were to be competing in like playoff races or chase races, but I'm all for these drivers challenging the competitors in O'Reilly or in Truck. Again, I keep feeling like I'm saying, I feel like I'm saying Xfinity all the time, but if I say Xfinity, it's O'Reilly. But I'm all for these drivers giving their competitors a challenge. All for it. Love it. So that's the news. The Hendrick Motorsports drivers are going to be competing in a few races here and there in Junior Motorsports equipment in 2026. The season is close to being underway. But speaking of some other announcements regarding drivers, places, partnerships, I do want to highlight some interesting kind of findings for 23XI Racing and their partnership news for 2026. They announced that Xfinity is going to be a primary sponsor, I guess a majority sponsor, I should say, for Bubba Wallace in that 23 car at 23XI Racing. Let's talk about that for a second. Of course, Xfinity is no longer the title partner of NASCAR's second-tier stock car series, which we now know as the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. But they did reaffirm that they are very committed to NASCAR. They're shifting around their partnership in several different ways. And of course, by being a majority partner for Bubba Wallace in the number 23 team this year, that's kind of reaffirming they're not going anywhere. They're also going to be partnering still with Tyler Reddick. All of this, though, is not surprising, especially since they really showed their commitment to 23XI Racing last season with launching the Airspeed War Room that we saw. I covered it with Racing America. I think I covered it a little bit on my social media, but every team does have a war room of some sorts, whether it's high tech or whether it's just kind of chill, basic. Most teams have a way or a room or whatever that is to communicate with the folks back at the race shop and relay information from the race shop to the track during the races during race weekend. I got to have an exclusive look at 2311 Racing's War Room, Airspeed's War Room, and it was very, very impressive. Something that the team, of course, something that Xfinity was very, very proud of. They made it known there that there's a lot of exciting stuff on the horizon, not only for the rest of 2025, but of course going into 2026 and beyond with their commitment to 2311 Racing. So doesn't surprise me, a little concerning to the fact that you're having a sponsor like this step up so much. Not a bad thing, never a bad thing, but it makes you wonder about how other sponsorships are taking shape over at 2311 Racing. And my mind goes to not the fallout of the federal antitrust lawsuit, but because of the uncertainty there with, are we going to get charters? Are we not? Are we going to win this lawsuit? Are we not? Or is there going to be a settlement? Whatever that looked like, if I was a partner, I would be kind of scared to commit going forward. That's just me, though. But regardless, excited to see Xfinity taking a big step forward with 2311 Racing, committing themselves to Bubba Wallace, and of course, they're going to have a primary scheme for Bubba during the Daytona 500. So what a way to kick off the year with more partnerships with 2311 Racing. Now let's shift the conversation to talking about the Daytona 500. As we mentioned it for Bubba Wallace's paint scheme, we have to talk about some drivers that are going to attempt to make the field for the 500. The big news today that really wasn't a surprise to a lot of people is that Corey LaJoie will be making another attempt to get into the Daytona 500 field, this time though with RFK Racing and the number 99. Very excited for the 99 to be back at RFK Racing. Was a big Carl Edwards fan. So very excited for this. Corey LaJoie continues to stack his pennies and puts them towards Daytona 500 seats. Remember last year he did exceptionally well, quite honestly, in the RWR equipment at the Daytona 500, led 10 laps. I felt like was in the mix for the most part, didn't end the race the best, ended outside the top 20. Regardless though, Corey LaJoie at super speedways, he's always going to be a contender, and I think he has decent equipment to be able to get the job done. Obviously, Corey's going to want to go after the win himself. Understand that, but I'm curious if this fourth car for RFK Racing can help them finally seal the deal and get a race win. They were winless last season and that broke my heart, not gonna lie. They really advanced their consistency last year, but I remember talking at Darlington with Ryan Preece and Chris Buescher and Brad Keselowski talking about did they feel their season was successful, and all of them said no, we did not win. So starting off maybe with a win at the Daytona 500 would be a win. It would also be a win if Ryan Preece could keep 4 tires on the ground. I would love nothing more than to see that for him, but maybe with adding a 4th car in the mix with those 3 full-time drivers, maybe it'll help them achieve what they need, which is a win. A good way to start off the 2026 season. And speaking of Corey LaJoie as an open car, the final piece of news is let's dive into who we have confirmed as open entries for this year's Daytona 500. Obviously, with the OEP, the Open Exemption Provisional, Jimmy Johnson is already locked into the Daytona 500 in the number 84 with Legacy Motor Club. The other drivers we have confirmed are Justin Allgaier in the number 40 for Junior Motorsports. We have JJ Yeley in the number 44 with NY Racing. Anthony Alfredo returns announced today in the number 62 for Beard Motorsports. He's always a contender when he's racing in super speedway events with this team, so expect him to do pretty well. We have Casey Mears in the number 66 for Garage 66 Racing, as well as Corey Hyman, the 67 for 2311 Racing, and of course BJ McLeod in the number 78 for Live Fast Motorsports. Those drivers will be competing for 4 spots. I'm going to be very curious to see who gets in. I'm going to call it now, though. I think Justin Allgaier will make it in. I think Corey LaJoie will make it in. I think Anthony Alfredo will make it in. And I quite honestly, I think Corey Hyman can do it. I'm going to say Corey Hyman will do it. Those are the 4 drivers I think are going to race their way in, whether via qualifying or from the duels. So I'm going to call my shot there. But there is some NASCAR news. Hopefully you're up to date now. If I missed anything, we will definitely have it covered for you all at AboveTheLine.com, so make sure to check out the site. And of course, make sure to keep up with us on social media at ATYL Media, or keep up with me at AboveTheLine or at _TaylorKitchen_. But good to chat with you all. And until next time, I'll see ya. Bye.